thank you guys for coming. This is going to be a hard conversation. Things aren't good right now. But I think it's an important one for us to have. I think this was called like Superpowers and how Web3 can make that a reality. So we're going to talk about that with these amazing folks right here. And part of what I am going to challenge you guys on is like, let's talk about the realities of the state of the market also. I do want to, I'd like to set up a tone for the sessions that I moderate. So 2 quick little stories, anecdotes that I think will help put us in the right mindset. So the first is that my bank PIN code is 771273. And I say that because recently when I went to Chase Bank, I put my card in and they were like, and it said you have to change your PIN code. And so I was going to, and it only gave me a 4-digit option. So I went to the teller and I said, I'm not comfortable with a 4-digit option. And the teller said, oh, that's system-wide. It's because people were complaining that their PIN codes were too hard to remember. So I only say that in the sense that I think consumers are so, to use Mag's term over there, lazy, and that they crave simplicity at such a base level. That's really challenging, I think, for our industry, because we're here saying security, privacy, don't give out your seed phrase, connect your hardware wallet, all of this stuff. And so one of the questions I think that will be a part of the macro part of our conversation is about, are we actually building things that consumers actually want or that we think consumers want? The second sad tale that I'm going to start this with is, 2 weeks ago, I got an email that said Recur was shutting down. For anyone who doesn't know, Recur, talk about consumer crypto, what we thought was going to be a great story. They had minted 380,000 NFTs. Their partners were Hello Kitty, Paramount, Star Trek. They were working with the top brands. And they raised $50 million 2 years ago this month. And they shut down, and the rumors were because they were running out of money. So the other side I think that we all have to be realistic about is there's a ton of money that comes into crypto from VCs, from brands, and our founders have to be better founders. They have to figure out how to create true use cases that will scale and that will take time for us to get there. So I only say that because I do think consumer crypto is in a really interesting space that we will come out of and probably come out really strong. But I think we're in a bit of a low period in the idea of consumer crypto. So my first question for you guys is, Chris Lyon from A16Z uses this phrase that we got to hide the wires, right? That the more that people don't understand they're on crypto rails, the better. There are also a lot of us in the industry who say, no, you want people to know you're on Web3. You want people to know it's crypto. And so my question first for you guys is, do you take an approach of be blatantly open, this is crypto, this is a new paradigm, a new technology? Or is it like, no, just give us your email address and in the back end, we'll make it crypto? So Alex, why don't you start?
I think that one of the things about most of the people in this room in crypto probably believe is that we all probably get a feeling of security from like taking those extra steps, but I've never thought about the security in putting my credit card onto a website to buy something. I assume it's there and I don't really think about it. It must exist. And I think that is something that we've kind of lost the way on and forgotten about. I think that there's ways in terms of like what can crypto deliver, like how do you show the wires? How do you provide a superpower from crypto that you couldn't have done otherwise that users can actually touch and feel? Like in the case of DIMO, we're building the DIMO token as really a way to be a reward system for your car. It's like Sky Miles for your car. If you book maintenance and you book insurance and do these other things, you end up earning more rewards. And that's a heuristic that is familiar to the customer in terms of a reward point, rather than like, here's this token, this governance token, which it also does. You have to go vote on these proposals and be involved in governance. And that's new and not hiding the wires. So I think that there's ways to do both that are going to showcase new ways of using the technology, but are also familiar to the customer.
Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I think if Web 2 had this concept of a user experience. The Web 3 has this concept of maybe like an ownership experience. And the fundamental implication of the technology is that we, as individuals using products, get to own the underlying asset. And that needs to be, the implication of that technology needs to be delivered to a user in a way that feels natural to the user. So hiding the wires, but showcasing the utility of that new feature that this technology unlocks, I think, is what has yet to be done in a way that we can all like point to something, and is kind of the job of developers and designers in the space. Users don't want to think about this, and they don't want to think about like what database a traditional product sits on. So you need to show them why it matters to them for the use case that you're building against. So I like this concept of ownership experience that I think like designers in Web3 could wrap their heads around. I think that's what's, there's a little bit of a delta between current consumer products and where we could be landing with like next generation ownership experience.
Ronil, what you guys are doing is trying to disrupt a pretty massive industry of music. And part of the way you guys have come about it is to sort of, I think, lever ownership, and then this is a new paradigm. Do you think that that lands with a wide enough music audience?
It's a great question. So I think it does with the artist and creator community, and it's those groups on Audius that bring the fans, right? I don't think the average fan knows any different or could care less, right? But if they're finding music from their favorite artists that they can't find anywhere else, they're going to come listen to it, right? But from the artist standpoint, these, I really like the way you put that, the kind of like showing the benefits of the wires effectively without exposing the wires, right? The artists that use Audius come because they control the audience they build here. They have the ability to price access to content in the ways they choose, or give it away for free if they want to as well. That level of control and kind of sovereignty, those things resonate with them because they've never had those things before. But from the fan perspective, I don't think they really care, right? So it's really up to the artists and the creators that use these tools to make whatever they're offering sufficiently interesting that fans actually want to come engage with it. But yeah, I think, you know, so I guess we're all kind of agreeing in the same way. But yeah, I think if you can approach things that way and give people the value and the net new things here without beating them upside the head with the fact that this is a different set of, you know, technologies and technology stack, there is a path to getting meaningful mainstream adoption here, right? So.
And Will, I mean, you guys see a lot of different projects at Alchemy. Like, is your sense that people are actually building truly with business models in mind, or are they building with hypotheses that still need to be proven out?
Both, right? I think a business model is a hypothesis, right? And it's on the founders to prove that a business model can work by achieving product market fit. And the wires are often what interfere with that business model succeeding, right? So I worked at Uniswap for the last 2 years, and I'm sure many people in this room have used Uniswap, and you've been willing to step over the wires to get to that trade because you really want that token. And then last year, we built out the Uniswap wallet. And the goal there was to hide the wires, because people don't want wires, they want to see the light bulb, right? And it was actually very challenging because of the design of the ownership system that we have in Ethereum. It's very hard to hide the seed phrase. You need to give that to the user. And so I think what we need in this next phase of crypto is to actually build deeper technology that can hide the wires. And that's where things like account abstraction come into play. That's where we've heard earlier from Raj at Portal building MPC technology. These are new technological advances that are both hypotheses, they're also business models, and they're all aimed at hiding the wires from users.
One of the comments about crypto, I think, is that everyone wants to get rich. And we all want to find something early, right? I'm a big music fan, so I'm just going to pick on Ronil for a second. I did a thought experiment the other day, which is I went and I picked a band, and I picked Green Day. And I went on a bunch of marketplaces for their first ever pressing of their first album. And I said, how much would it cost me to get one in mint condition? There was like 5,000 ever released. It was $60. right? So here's a band that's world known, tens of millions of fans every month. Listening to them have made millions or billions of dollars. The premise that we've told everyone is, oh, what if you could be that first supporter of Green Day? Think of the valuation that happens because you were early, that you can participate in X, Y, and Z. And the fact is, you were participating, but you were participating because you got to discover something and you got an emotional opportunity. But the theory we've been saying to people of like, oh, you're the first person to buy X copy, yes, you made a lot of money. Now to be the first person to support music artist Y, you also can have that. And I think it's done a big disservice because we have attached valuation to early adopterhood, if you will. And I think a lot about the fact that when people started to come into Instagram, they weren't being financially rewarded, but they were coming in by the millions because it created a network effect and community. But no one was like, how am I going to get rich on this? Maybe a couple people thought about it, but most of the people were not. Why do you guys think that there's still so much, right? We're seeing it in Frentech today. Why do we think there's so much of the price speculation has to be tied to the success of the project, which then gets in the way of innovators like yourselves of being able to maybe get the real use case you want from your consumers? Renil, since I started with music, let's go to you.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I couldn't agree more with what you said, right? Like, those first pressings on an inflation-adjusted basis probably cost the same today as they did back then. With very limited exceptions, that's the case across the board. There are certain albums and first pressings of albums from much longer ago that do command those thousands, tens of thousands of dollars per copy, but otherwise, like, it's not. The point of it was not to speculate. The point was to be able to listen to music, right? And I think crypto misses that too much, right? It's I think if your core like value prop as a product is not compelling enough that people would want to use it or engage with it in the absence of speculation, you're probably like fucking up in some significant ways at square one that you need to go revisit, right? I do think their speculative elements can be powerful multipliers, but they can't be the only thing, right? And I think in too much of crypto that is the only thing, and so you get these just insane levels of volatility and cycles. Like, a user of a product shouldn't need to think or care about what's the crypto market doing today to get value out of it, right? If they're getting value in whatever ways that a given product delivers to them, that can be divorced from the speculative, volatile nature of a lot of these things, right?
I think that the industry is discovering that some of these early incentives and these early airdrops were very like minimal viable incentive. It's like you got people in the room, you gave them a reward, and like that's where the journey stopped. And I think a lot of that is being rethought. I know the DIMO Foundation is thinking about this, and I've talked with many other foundations that are taking this approach too, which is like, you got to get the user to do a little more than just show up. They probably need to provide some value back into the system before you're rewarding them. And there has to be an ongoing relationship there. Too many projects were like one shot. You literally all you did was step in the room, like connect your wallet, we'll hook you up. And I think that really skewed customer perceptions. You had airdrop farmers and all of the corollaries that would follow with that kind of an incentive model. And I think that we're going to see the same way we're seeing tokenomics mature, we're seeing like that element of tokenomics, this initial incentive, really go through a real evaluation in the face of what we've seen in the last couple of years.
Mike, what are your thoughts on valuation?
Valuation and speculation.
Exactly, as part of the consumer experience.
Yeah, I think it's like easy. I think a lot of founders that are just starting their projects, it's kind of like you're desperate to get this thing to work. So the low-hanging fruit is like, let's build a speculative product that gets our like network bootstrapped, and that can sound really appealing because like otherwise you're going to be a nobody that nobody ever heard of, and maybe it's a good thing to like just get your product out there, but it attracts a certain type of user. And probably the wrong type of user for the long-term sustainability of your product and your project. I think where we get like broad stroke consumer adoption is actually not through the speculative features of crypto, and there are some use cases where that's valuable, but through just open networks of interoperable products and protocols. Because today the standard, if you want to launch a product, is you go raise venture capital, you bootstrap the supply side of your network and then you get to test your idea. That is way too expensive. What if instead these users in these pre-existing networks were just instantly accessible to anybody that wanted to build a new product on top of that protocol? Now you get this possible Cambrian explosion of new ideas that emerge in these markets, but it's our job to essentially bootstrap the network effects of the protocol. I think that's happening right now, and this year has actually been really interesting for like consumer adoption technology, things like account abstraction and passkeys. So I think we're like at the precipice here of like something actually really remarkable for the industry.
Will, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I very much so agree. I think going back to your opening tone set, I actually don't believe that self-custody is the primary value proposition behind crypto. I myself have never cared that much about it. I think for me, the more important thing that resonates in crypto for me is composability and interoperability.
Yeah.
The magic behind crypto is that two different people anywhere in the world can collaborate on any project. They can take their assets, their data, their items, and use it in any different app in the ecosystem. And so that interoperability is really the kernel of magic that I think will be driving consumer adoption. And I think Nosh and DIMO are both like really great examples of that, where they've taken what were formerly fairly centralized products, and Nosh is building a decentralized version of DoorDash, where the suppliers and the consumers are incentivized to participate in the network organically and build it out. I think when you set up the network in that way, people are encouraged and activated to use it, and that's really the special value prop. So where we'll see use cases catch on first are ecosystems where that kind of composability is valued and useful and also feasible given like current competitive or regulatory dynamics around those industries.
All right, last question, lightning round. Each of you, what are 2 ways that you think consumer companies, consumer-focused Web3 companies should be utilizing, like what are the things that will help them stand out? Alex?
Things that will help them stand out. I think diversification of on-ramps, we're talking about it a lot, speculation and payments. These are the things that crypto's been doing and great use case for, but I don't wake up every day worried about, somebody saying like my bank or, how am I going to send payments today? There's 10,000 other apps on my phone that do different things that like, let's show crypto or let's show other people like the ways that crypto can impact those other industries and businesses.
Simple onboarding UX is like imperative. Like if you're asking your average consumer to like memorize a passphrase, people can't memorize their password for anything, and so like forget about it. You need easy solutions. I think actually there's really interesting things that have emerged over the last month on this specific topic. So talk to me after this, and I'll tell you more about it because we just built something really cool. And then I think just interoperability is going to be like the thing that gets more products building in this space, where it's less expensive, lower barrier to entry, lower cost to entry. And then we have like brand new products emerging around these open interoperable networks, and it's going to be a big deal.
Yeah, I'm going to double down on the onboarding UX as well. So a quick anecdote, like in the early days of Audius, the first like alpha version of the product did require MetaMask in part of the sign-up flow. And we were testing it with a handful of artists, most of whom were not crypto native. We saw about 95% of them, and this was, a small sample set, it was like 50, 60 people, but about 95% of them when they got to that step in the onboarding flow where it was like, hey, you need to install this Chrome extension, like do X, Y, and Z to use the product, dropped off. They're like, I don't want to do this. This is weird. Why do I need a Chrome extension? What is a Chrome extension? It's like questions that you don't want to have to answer, right? To like just sign up for something, right? So really nailing that onboarding UX and getting to a place where a user can put in the credentials that are familiar to them, a username and a password, and be able to use the thing, but have speed bumps and things in the right places such that if a user starts moving actual value with their account or things like that, you nudge them towards more secure options over time. So yeah, I think that's my only one, honestly. If you can nail that, I think.
Yeah, completely agree. And on top of onboarding, we have to make gas disappear. It's crazy to expect a new user to deposit $100 into your product before they've tried it even once. Imagine going to Instagram and having to do that. right? And so I think some of the more exciting projects we see now building on Alchemy are using account abstraction and technologies like MPC to sponsor gas, and you can just pay with a credit card, right? Or in many cases, the application has built a business model that will allow them to sponsor gas in order to drive engagement. Exactly. And I think once you can hide the cost and the finance aspect of these applications, they will become less speculative and more grounded for consumers.
All right, well, thank you guys. I'm Sam from CoinDesk. I have a podcast every week that talks about consumers coming onto crypto. So come check it out, called Gen C. And thank you guys for the time. It's great.